Welcome into the PFF State of the Franchise. It is the Seattle Seahawks edition. Sam, what's going on in Seattle? It's time to have some roster turnover, right? I mean, this was pretty much inevitable. A team that had to pay Russell Wilson. He's off his rookie contract. A lot of big names out the door this offseason.
Yeah, everybody's left the building, and not many people have come in to replace him so far. The turnover is incredible. Richard Sherman has left. Michael Bennett has left. Two different Richardsons have left. Paul Richardson and Sheldon Richardson are out the door. Jimmy Graham has gone. Deshaun Shedd, Jeremy Lane. That's most of the secondary is out of the door in one offseason. And so far, there's been very little done to replace that. They've re-signed Bradley McDougald, their own safety. But the only real acquisitions coming in are Jerron Brown at receiver. That's a like-for-like replacement with Richardson, at least in terms of what he can do within the offense. And then the answer to pass rushing problems is Barkevious Mingo.
Yes, one of my old favorites. They say your seventh team is your best team, so it's all going to click from Mingo in Seattle.
You want a fun Barkevious Mingo stat?
I do.
Aaron Donald sat out 2 games last year, one at the start, one at the end, and still had more pressures over the season than Barkevious Mingo has in his NFL career.
Man, I was a big fan of Mingo coming out. He has not really panned out, but he's always kind of worth a look as that rotational guy. But what is Seattle going to do now? And are we at the point in the NFL where it is just so difficult to truly build that elite roster year over year because of the quarterback position? Because we're talking about a team that built around Russell Wilson on his rookie contract and just nailed every draft pick from Earl Thomas, Russell Okung, Richard Sherman, Michael Bennett. They pick him up in free agency, Cliff Averill. I mean, they're making all of the right moves. And now the roster seems like it is taking that step back, and it's rebuilding time.
Well, look, that was the key, is that they had a couple of phenomenal drafts which set them up with all these talented all-pro players on rookie contracts. And we were saying this is too easy for the Seahawks. They were taking players and redshirting them because that roster was so stacked. That's how well they drafted for a couple of years. They just haven't been able to do that since. Their strike rate on draft picks since that point has been pretty ugly. And now they're paying for that. They're paying the price for that lack of draft success. This is a really important draft for them upcoming because they need to have another good one. If they don't have another good draft, we're going to see a roster that suddenly looks dramatically worse than it has in the past, and it's even more than in previous seasons. It's all going to be on the shoulders of Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and a big part of their inability to hit in the draft is not having first-round picks, whether it's a Jimmy Graham trade, whether it's Percy Harvin trade. So they've been aggressive. They were aggressive during Russell Wilson's rookie contract. So looking at the roster and just what they need to attack going forward, we're talking about a defensive line that's essentially, the secondary gets all the credit, but the defensive line has really just been so consistent year over year. They took a step back last year, even with Michael Bennett and with Cliff Averill when he was healthy. How are they going to replace that? So that's a place where I think they definitely have to attack in the draft. Can you ever replace Richard Sherman? They have to find that big, long corner. Love what your boy Shaq Griffin did last year, but there's still a lot of holes here.
Yeah, look, the numbers from Richard Sherman's career basically speak for themselves. Last season he allowed 46.3% of passes thrown his way to be incomplete. Anything under 50% is pretty staggering. 46.3 is fantastic. For his entire career, he's allowed 47.7% of passes thrown his way to be complete. So you're looking at legitimately one of the best corners in the league year after year after year. It's tough to replace that, and they haven't started trying yet. Shaq Griffin is going to be one of the 2 starters. We don't know if he's going to step into that number 1 role or if they're going to go hard for a number 1 corner in the draft. But either way, you need that guy to come in and act like one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL from the get-go for this to not be a significant drop-off. The other player I think that's really important for them going forward is Dion Jordan, former first-round bust, essentially, a guy that was out of the league for a while, looked really good towards the tail end of that season. They made sure they retained him as a restricted free agent this offseason. He had 4 sacks, 3 hits, 5 hurries in the very tail end of that season. Some fantastic grades for them. Looked like a guy that was a first-round pick talent. So if they can get him on the field, get Frank Clark motoring, get a little something from that pass rush again, then that makes life a lot easier for those guys in the back end.
So it'll just look a little different. Fewer stars, more guys like that needing to emerge, maybe a Nazir Jones who had a pretty nice rookie season rushing on the interior. So the defense has some holes, really, for the first time in quite a while in Seattle. Offense as well. You still need to look at wide receiver, who's going to be the complement opposite Doug Baldwin. Do they trust Tyler Lockett enough to be that guy consistently? So I think they can add some depth there. Offensive line, as much as they've just really have struggled in recent years, they did get much better down the stretch with the addition of Dwayne Brown at left tackle.
That was huge. That transformed that offensive line from one of the worst in the NFL to at least somewhere in the average range. You know, they've still got some problems. There are weak links on that offensive line that can definitely stand to be upgraded, but Dwayne Brown made a huge impact there, and I think that's one of the smartest moves they've made. They're also apparently trying to change tack in terms of the players they're chasing for that offensive line. They're going to look in a slightly different direction, so maybe we'll see a different style of player acquired in this offseason that might have a better chance of coming in immediately and having some higher level play.
So maybe fewer basketball players and former defensive linemen.
Former defensive linemen, not
playing on the offensive line. I would say it's a bit of a scary yet exciting time if you're a Seahawks fan. Some of the big names are out the door, but it's a time to start to rebuild. You still have Russell Wilson. He's a top 5, top 10 type of quarterback. It's time to rebuild around Russell Wilson in Seattle. That is your state of the franchise, and it's powered by PFF Elite.